In today's environment, fact-checking and fake news are two issues that come up quite a bit. They are different, right? Fake news gets thrown around a lot. What I want to talk about is fact-checking and what that really means. We've had tabloid news and things that were clearly fake for quite some time. But the new concept of purposely misleading people is a challenge to democracy, frankly. So let's take a look at what our project is going to be made up of and what it takes to accurately fact check your information. So a good project has background research and then original research. So where you gather information beforehand so that you can be up to speed on the topic, and then the original research you do in the form of interviews. One of the things that's important is to stay up with the issue that you're researching. So it's a good idea to do a Google alert, which you can just Google alerts, and that'll take you to the page. But it's essentially setting up a search for your topic that will return results to you as new information is posted. You can set it up in a number of different ways. You can set one up on your name if your name is unusual enough, and you can get results returned to you on a daily or weekly basis. Also, beyond Google, obviously, there's a lot of research to be done, and we'll spend another lesson talking about library resources. So this is really about credibility and your reputation. Really, the only thing a journalist has is credibility, right? All you have is your credibility, and your reputation rests on whether or not we can believe the information that you produce. The reputation of your employer rests on whether or not we can believe the information that you produce. So there's bad practice, and then there's purposeful deception. So bad practice is what gets us in trouble, and there's reasons for bad practice. We like to think that we're always doing our very best, and we're always going to be as completely accurate as we can be, but we know that we're working against deadline pressure and all manner of things, but we still must adhere to good practices. And the issue of deception should never come into it from our perspective, but we do have to be careful that we don't get caught up in being deceived ourselves. So let's take a look at two things. This is in your reading. You read this story about how this number, 500 million straws, has been thrown around a lot. And it's hard to believe that something that we have seen in so many media stories, the number 500 million straws, Americans use 500 million straws every day, it just seems like it must be true because so many news organizations have used that number, from the Washington Post and the New York Times down to small publications. So after you read this story, I hope that you walk away with this thinking, don't let this happen to me, right? Is that just because you've read something in a reputable media source, you still have to question, how do I really know that? I need to get back to the source of that information before I can use it. So take note of that in your project. I don't want you quoting another media source, not according to the New York Times or as was quoted to get back to the original source of the information. And you can do that by, if a researcher is quoted, call the researcher yourself. Look up the researcher's work yourself. Then there is purposeful deception. So here's something from the UK Express. Kim Fox and Prince Harry are looking for another home. Yep, that's what that says. That's the website, and that's the headline. Now, you're probably smart enough to know that's not true. This is the actual headline, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, right? So that makes a lot more sense. But it is actually quite easy to change the content of a website, or to make it look like it's been changed and then to take a screen grab, right? Because I didn't actually go in and change this so that everybody else could look at it this way, but I did change it so that it appeared that way on my screen, and then I could take a screenshot. So you may be familiar with how to do that. It just comes down to a little coding. And this is the quick version of how you do it, right? So you go to inspect. So if you do a mouse click and you pull up the screen, you go to inspect, and it brings up this screen of coding. And so in here, you can go down and find the words you're looking for, and you can change the words so that instead of it saying Meghan Markle, it can say Kim Fox. when you think about this, it's kind of a fun thing that people do, but it really can be used for evil, right? It can be used for evil. So we want to make sure that you are always sure of what you're looking at, and that's how some things get tossed around on social media. So don't be fooled. This is what it really comes down to, right? Is that common sense. If you see something and you think that that sounds unusual to you or hard to believe, that's your common sense telling you you really need to check that out. And frankly, it's the old concept of if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. So there are a number of organizations that have for a long time had these sort of fact checkers or truth checking. So Snopes is one that has been around for a long time. You may have heard of the Snopes website. And it sort of started with urban legends and urban myths where people would sort of pass these stories around even before we were very active online, pass these sort of rumors around. Well, now Snopes does quite a bit of fact checking. So it is definitely worth checking out. If you just put in some search words, you can see it. They'll rate things as false or partly false, and they'll explain, or true, right? And so they'll explain what goes into that. So on Snopes, you can do a search for it, and also they have sort of the most recent stuff up top. There's also this browser extension that I have on my computer, and it's called the BS detector, because you don't often get to use the poop emoji in your browser, but it's the browser extension for BS detector. So when you call up a website, it will actually tell you at the top if there's a potential problem with it. So, for example, InfoWars and Breitbart, which are pretty commonly known for not being as reliable, as soon as you call up a website that you may not be familiar with, if it's got a problem, it'll give you this warning, right? Warning, this may not be a reliable source. So clickbait, which is meaning that stuff is posted here with the intention of getting you to click through and then to make money for them. And in this one, it was may not be a reliable source because it's known for conspiracy theory. So worth checking out that browser extension if that's something you think might be helpful to you. Here's another piece that I want you to read or to watch as part of our required reading for this lesson, and it's the concept of deep fakes. We've seen a lot written about that lately, and it is truly a concern because we can be taken in by it. So as a journalist, you can be taken in by it, and also it just hurts the credibility of journalism, because how are we going to expect people to believe what we're publishing if it is so easy to make something fake? So lots of stuff to watch there. Researching and backgrounding your topic is really the hard work of journalism, right? So that really is the hard work of journalism. And I know that's hard work, and I know it can be a challenge, but it is also the most rewarding thing that we do, right? When we hear people's stories, we take people's stories and we take care of them and we tell them. That's important. Backgrounding, here's a few tips, some resources that are posted in tracks. So there's a lot of tip sheets and things like that out there in the world, and this comes from IRE, the Investigative Reporters and Editors. So these are some ways to track down information. You can check that out. But back, to the beginning, it really comes down to common sense, right? So when you look at information, does it make sense to you? And if you need help tracking down credible information, I am happy to help.